Well, today I have a special guest. I'm really looking forward to diving into all things women's health, whether it's gut health, hormonal health. We're even going to be talking about breast implants. There's been a lot in the media lately about women getting the explants for various reasons. Sometimes they just desire a different look. Other times they feel that there might be some autoimmune reactions going on. And so we're going to be talking about all of these things today. Today, I have with me Ciara Foy. She is a celebrated expert in women's weight loss and hormone health. She empowers high achieving women with strategies for self care and sustained energy so that they can chase their dreams. She is the author of Empowered by Food, and she provides insights into hormonal health and stress management. Through the Empowered Feminine podcast, great podcast, by the way, Ciara shares her journey about overcoming weight issues, burnout. Boy, can I relate to the burnout part, hormonal challenges, and she just continues to inspire women to embrace their confidence. Her expertise particularly shines through when she is supporting women through perimenopause and menopause, two important transitions in a woman's life. She's been featured in top publications like Elle and Flair. Ciara's expertise helps women worldwide to achieve health, balance, and success. Welcome to the show, Ciara.
Oh, thank you so much, Carol. I'm excited to have a really impactful conversation with you for your community.
I am as well. Ciara was gracious enough. We had tried to do this interview a few weeks ago, and my calendar went rogue on me. And I showed up at one time, she showed up at another. So she was gracious enough to come back on. And so super excited for this conversation.
Well, life is not perfect, right? That's what we have to learn is just to roll with the punches.
Oh my goodness, especially as entrepreneurs, if you're a woman in the audience who's an entrepreneur, you will understand that perfection just isn't part of it.
Exactly. I always say to my clients, whether it's food or business, perfection is the enemy of great.
I love that. Love that. So what brought you to working with women in both the health and the business field? I mean, where did you start? You were in the entrepreneurial world? Or excuse me, were you in a corporate world or what background did you come from?
Yeah, I was in the corporate world for a short period of time. In Canada, Canada's like equivalent to Wall Street is called Bay Street. So I originally worked on Bay Street at, one of the best business law firms in Canada. And what I saw there was a lot of women who were incredibly smart, who had massive career goals, but the way that they were treating themselves during the process was causing them to be burning the candle at both ends and burning out. I originally wanted to be a lawyer, and that was my plan. At the time, I was a securities law clerk. And so I ended up marrying a lawyer. And that is why I kind of put that aside and thought it would be fun to stay at home and just be a mom. And I can't say just be a mom. I think it is the hardest job to be a stay at home mom. And it was something that didn't suit me. So when my daughter was a year old, I went back to school for nutrition because I had always been interested in nutrition. I was the girl in 2000 at the law firm making smoothies in the kitchen, and people were like, "What the heck are you doing?" So, 25 years ago, that was definitely a strange sight to be seen. So, I would say interest in nutrition really came because grew up in the 90s in the Kate Moss, let's be as skinny as possible era, Xers. And I developed a relationship with food that was very much all or nothing, very much rooted in that perfectionism, which, for high achieving women is something that we can often, fall for, wanting to be perfect, wanting to be the best, pushing ourselves as hard as we can. And so I developed a really poor relationship with food. And what I learned along the way is that the more that I knew, like the more that I actually took the time to understand nutrition, understand my body, the more freedom I had. And so that passion really turned into, me going back to school for nutrition. And I've been learning ever since. So it's, been 20 years now. And it is something that I'm so passionate about because I think so many women struggle with our self image, whether that is when we're younger or whether it's like midlife when we're aging. And we're going through this perimenopause and menopause transition, and a lot of things are changing. It can really impact the relationship we have with ourselves. And so for me, what I found was that, knowledge is really power. And that's why, my book is about being empowered. My podcast is about being empowered. And it's just understanding our body on a deeper level so that we can really partner with her, not think that she's working against us, but actually understand the signs and symptoms that she's giving us so that we can use them to our advantage. And it's really incredible what we are capable of when we take care of ourselves as women. So that's where I got started.
You know, as you were speaking, I was thinking so much about how, as women, we go on diets at a very young age. A lot of us don't develop a good relationship with food. And the sad thing is, I'm still seeing this. I'm seeing younger women still repeat the same mistakes that I myself did. I'm 63 now, but I remember growing up in the 70s, you couldn't be skinny enough at that time. It was really about being thin. A muscle wasn't even anything we spoke about, talked about. And so I did the same thing. I remember going on my first diet and it was a salad with absolutely no protein, anything on it. It was like lettuce. And then I think I drank Fresca or something at the
Yeah.
time.
You're like, let's take in sugar and okay.
Right, right. I just didn't know. And, I've tried to speak with my daughters about, I have two daughters, they're grown now, but I remember going through my phase and I still hadn't figured it out. And it saddens me that I didn't give them the message sooner about really nourishing our body. It's really about fueling our bodies. It's not about being as thin as we can possibly be.
Yeah, absolutely. If it makes you feel any better, I have two daughters, and one is 21 and one is 14. And I can tell you that even though I'm constantly talking about that message, they generally don't want to hear it. So
They don't. They don't.
but they are taking it in through osmosis. Like I know my 21-year-old at one point, like I think during the pandemic, she had put on a little bit of weight and she was like, okay, I'm like back at the gym and, tracking my macros. And she was like, see, mom, like I totally know what I'm doing. Like she was able to do it like no problem. And she's also a chef, so she knows how to cook. And she was like, see, mom, I was always listening. I just didn't want to do it, but I know. So, you just, that's all we can do as parents is like be an example, teach them, impart on them what they need to know to be healthy. And then at some point, they have to make that decision to care for themselves in that way, as we all do.
So true. I was relating to what you said. My oldest is 28 and she has a healthy meal prep company. So she delivers meals around the city. So she was paying attention to many of the
Amazing.
things I was telling her. And it's funny, I hear her give advice to her friends that are like, "Oh no, you need to eat. You're not eating enough calories. You're not doing yourself any favors by eating, 1,000 calories a day." Yeah, I think they do. They have to make their own choices, but they do take in more than what we realize. Now, with with women, what do you think is the biggest obstacle for women going through perimenopause? Now, I feel like perimenopause and menopause are kind of two different things. For me, perimenopause was harder than being postmenopausal because of the ups and the downs. What do you think is the biggest driver of difficulty for women, whether it's with weight loss or how they feel? Is it loss of energy? Is it gut health? What do you see?
So, I think that the biggest driver and the thing that they struggle with the most actually encompasses all of those things: energy, weight loss, even our cognitive function, our ability to sleep, which is struggles with blood sugar. And so we're not taught about understanding blood sugar and how we eat and when we eat and exercise and stress and how all of those things actually impact our blood sugar. And so that really comes down to that nutrition part, because some of the things that happen during perimenopause, when estrogen is going up and down, our body is under more stress. So there's more inflammation when estrogen is going up and down like that. And there's also more insulin resistance that's happening underneath the surface, right? And if you are somebody who's been eating very few calories, not eating enough protein, not doing any strength training, then what's also been happening is that you've been losing more muscle than you have to. Like, we're all going to start losing muscle once we turn 30. But if we're not doing anything like, supporting protein synthesis through weight training or you need to do both really through nutrition and, hitting 30 grams of protein per meal. So you get that threshold that supports protein synthesis, which is the process by which we build or maintain muscle, then they are going to have even bigger problems with blood sugar. And so blood sugar ends up being a massive issue for them. And we're not taught about that at all, even though you cannot balance any hormone without first starting with blood sugar. You always have to look at like insulin and cortisol. So that is the biggest thing that I see women struggle with, because it's going to impact all of those things that you're speaking of.
I know when I was in my 40s, I was completely unaware. No one was having the conversation then. So we didn't talk about perimenopause. I remember hearing the term used once in my 30s and then reading that, oh, that doesn't actually exist. That's
Not a thing.
that's
Oh,
not a
no.
thing.
No.
It's like how they used to say, oh, stress really doesn't affect us. And now we know that's not true at all. But I was not keyed in to blood sugar. I mean, to me, the first things I noticed was, okay, the night sweats, the hot flashes, the not sleeping. And so we tend to think of just the sex hormones and we don't tend to look at insulin.
Yeah. And the truth is we have studies like if your blood sugar is more stable, that is going to, in and of itself, is going to reduce your hot flashes. That is also like if your blood sugar is unstable, it's also why you're going to wake up, at 3 a.m. every night. So there is so much about blood sugar that controls like all, because it's like a top down effect. You have insulin and cortisol, and then you have all of your sex hormones underneath, right? So no matter if you're 20 years old or if you're 60 years old, you need to be concerned about blood sugar. I think historically it's only been something that people think diabetics need to understand,
Right.
right? Whereas like we can really take a lot of stress off of our body. We can even reduce, how we age, like the speed of which we age can be reduced by managing blood sugar, because again, it reduces inflammation and it reduces free radical damage as well. That is what ages us and ourselves.
And that connection to the brain, because the brain needs blood glucose, but in high amounts, it's actually toxic. And, we start to see dementia, Alzheimer's related to blood sugar issues. Now, with the women you work with, how do you like to keep track of blood sugar? Are there specific tests you like them to get? Do you like them to wear a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor? How do you have them monitor this?
Yeah, so blood sugar is something I've been teaching for 20 years, and CGMs were definitely not popular 20 years ago.
No.
But so it's one of those things like I look at their blood work, and so something that you will find on anybody's standard blood work is your A1C, right? So your
Mhm.
hemoglobin A1C levels, which gives you an idea of what your blood glucose levels have been over like a 3-month period, so over like a longer period of time. And once that gets up to maybe 5.7, a doctor might say something about it, because at that point you're basically, a diabetic. That's the road that you're on. And diabetes takes a decade, to build. So it's been happening over a long period of time. It's not just you go up 2 points and all of a sudden you're diabetic, and it happened overnight. So, I'm looking at that. And I'm also looking at some historical blood work with my clients because, Ideally, you want to be between 4.7 and 5.2 with respect to your hemoglobin A1C. So that's one thing that we look at. But when it comes down to actually monitoring, I have had clients use a CGM, and I think that it's helpful mostly for them. And I'll explain what I mean by that is that I know that when I'm looking at somebody's food diary, when I'm asking them about their energy levels, when I'm asking them about their cravings and their sleep and, their hunger, when all of those things start to come in line, I know that their blood sugar is more balanced, right? When their menstrual cycles are regulating themselves, I know that their blood sugar is more balanced. There's many things that happen in a day and then also over a month and in our cycle that tell us if we're going in the right direction. So if I have a woman who, for example, was hypoglycemic, they can't seem to go very long without eating, otherwise they get low blood sugar. That again can be prevented with blood sugar management, because typically the issue is they're having these highs in their blood sugar. And when you have a spike in your blood sugar, your body secretes insulin from your pancreas and it brings down that high blood sugar. But I always like to say insulin is an overachiever. So it always does a little bit too good of a job and it brings your blood sugar lower than it needs to be. And then when it's low, that's dangerous for your body as well. So your body sends you a craving. And that's why so many people who are hypoglycemic will be told by their doctors, just have a little bit of orange juice or have a banana or something like that to get your low blood sugar up. But what you really want to do is actually prevent that cycle from happening. So, by paying attention to somebody's energy, to their sleep, to their cravings, seeing that they can go longer in between meals without having low blood sugar, without being hungry, not having cravings for sugar. Those are all signs that their blood sugar is stabilizing. And then, of course, weight loss. So when we stabilize our blood sugar and our body is not always secreting insulin, we will start to lose more body fat because we can't burn fat in the presence of insulin.
Right. Now, have you had a client? I've had this happen myself a couple of different times where they present as if there is a blood glucose issue, dysfunctional in some way, typically high. Perhaps they have a lot of weight to lose, 100 pounds, 75 pounds. But then they go get their labs, they bring it back to you, and the blood sugar in the morning, that the morning glucose is presenting lower, like perhaps in the 80s, not what you're anticipating. And maybe the hemoglobin A1C isn't perfect, but it's not in the diabetic range. Do you think this is indicative of somebody that's perhaps heading in that direction and the blood labs are just not reflecting this yet?
Yeah. And I think, that comes down to what I just said, like diabetes is building over a 10-year period. So if their hemoglobin is, over 5.7, but it's been trending up, then you're
Right.
already seeing that happen. So, and if somebody has gained weight, the process of gaining weight actually makes us more resistant to insulin itself. Always going to be underlying issues there. And at the end of the day, again, whether you're a healthy 20-year-old woman or somebody who needs to lose 75 pounds, it's still something that you want to incorporate and address, right? So I'm going to address blood sugar when I have a 25-year-old woman whose cycles are irregular, right? Or she has a lot of PMS symptoms, or she has PCOS. A lot of people don't realize that PCOS, the underlying root cause of that is also insulin resistance. So it's almost like a precursor to diabetes. So I would still look at that overall picture, even though it might not be, a red flag on a blood work. And I would still be teaching and treating them as if it were. And the truth is that I absolutely, no matter what somebody comes to me for, am always teaching about blood sugar management, because it is the underlying first place to start, no matter what we're dealing with. Like I said, whether it's hunger, whether it's weight loss, whether it's sleep issues, whether it's menstrual cycle, whether it's PMS, it's always something that we have to take into consideration.
I
and long
agree
before, yeah.
completely.
And before it's an issue, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to wait until somebody is full blown headed to type 2 diabetes. So much more difficult at that point. So I agree 100%. Now, shifting a little bit over to the gut health piece,
Hmm.
what happens in perimenopause? Because that was the first time I noticed gut health issues. And of course, at the time, like I said, nobody talked about this. My doctor didn't say anything.
Hmm.
I had no idea why all of a sudden I was having major digestive issues.
Hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like there's so many things that we can quote unquote get away with when we're younger. And then
So true.
right? And then when we get into our 40s, all of a sudden our body's like, hold up. Okay, I've been on the back burner for your entire life, but going forward, you're going to have to put me first. Otherwise, this is going to be a very bumpy road for you, right? So, it's one of those things that we see in clinical studies that there is such major changes in our microbiome and, those changes can cause our body to actually put on more visceral fat, which is that fat around our organs. So there has actually been studies that show that changes in the microbiome cause, our visceral fat to be produced even independently of an increase in
Mhm.
calories. So you don't have to be eating different or eating more, but all of a sudden those changes in the microbiome really impact your body composition. We've seen this in other studies, like you can actually, they've done trials where they would clinical trials where they would take like the feces, literally they do
Yeah.
fecal implants from a person who is suffering with obesity to a person who's like, fit athletic person. And when they do that, the person who is fit and athletic actually puts on weight. And the same is true on the other way around. If you do a fecal transplant from a fit person into an obese person, they start losing weight. So the bacteria that we have in our gut is representative of our diet, and it actually does start changing within 24 hours. So if you are eating a sad diet, so a standard American diet, lots of processed foods and sugars and additives, etc., and you start changing that, your microbiome will start changing within 24 hours, right? If you're somebody who's eating a lot of sugar and you stop eating sugar, the gut bacteria that survives on that sugar is going to start to die off and change. And that's where you can actually change your cravings based on what you eat, because it's not only a craving that you have in the brain. Like we all kind of are familiar with that sugar is addictive to the brain, but it's also these living bacteria inside of us, and we have a symbiotic relationship with them. We need them to survive. Don't have what they need to survive, they're going to send you a craving, right? So, that's why it can be so hard to just cut back on sugar. The easier way is actually to cut it out, because then you have that die off and you have actually less cravings faster. But the microbiome is really all about diversity. So the reason why this happens, I don't have an answer to like why does this happen exactly in perimenopause, but we know 100% that it does. And the answer to that is always going to be diversity with the food that you eat. So lots of plant foods. So even though I'm definitely somebody who supports, lots of protein and an animal-based protein diet. Hang on, I think my dog's all of a sudden making some noise back there. But that doesn't mean that plants are not important. And specifically, women in perimenopause and menopause, optimally, we want to be getting 30 to 35 grams of fiber per day, which you definitely have to work at doing. It is
Yes.
not easy to get that much fiber. Just, if you're like, oh, well, I eat healthy, I eat my vegetables, like, no, you really have to work at it in order to get that much fiber. And when we do, that has a really positive impact on our microbiome. But also fermented foods, sauerkraut and kimchi and miso and tempeh and things of that nature can also be really supportive. But overall, it really comes down to diversity. So making sure that you are always eating different types of plants. like even greens. If you like greens and you're always eating romaine lettuce, like throw in some radicchio in there, throw in some endive in there, throw in some arugula, like switch up the types of greens that you're using. And the more that we do that, the better the diversity for our microbiome and the happier we will be.
I love that you hit on the fiber. I've been on a huge fiber kick for myself and with my clients.
Yeah.
I came from the bodybuilding world, so I did some, 16, 17 competitions over the course of a decade.
Hmm.
Did my last one, almost 3 years ago. So I no longer compete.
Wow.
But
That's impressive, though.
But we
Wow.
were we were so focused on macronutrients. We were so focused on, okay, we have to hit this carb count, this fat count. Of course, the protein was huge, which yes, that's important. But we never looked at micronutrients. We never looked at fiber. It was never discussed. So when I came off of that lifestyle, I realized I was eating virtually no fiber because I was so focused on that protein piece and just would eat the same foods over and over again to
Hmm.
meet my macronutrients.
Hmm.
And boy, so many things can be remedied if we hit both that protein goal and that fiber goal.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's a big part of blood sugar management. Protein is and fiber is,
Yes.
right? Because protein really does help to set the stage and having enough, especially at our breakfast, where so many women are skipping breakfast. Don't do that. But, having enough protein at breakfast really sets the stage for our blood sugar for the rest of the day. But the fiber is also how we manage blood sugar as well as fat. So, because even protein, 30% of all protein breaks down into glucose. So we need the fat and the fiber along with our protein and our carbohydrates to slow down the load, the glycemic load of that meal so that we can have more steady blood sugar.
And then you think about from a cancer prevention strategy. Now,
Hmm.
we can't obviously prevent all cancers. There's not some magic supplement or something that we do, but fiber is one of those things that could really help in a preventive sense of certain cancers, such as colon cancer.
Yeah, for sure. And like blood sugar management is a huge one, right? Like
Hmm.
maintaining a proper weight, blood sugar management, reducing inflammation. Basically, everything that I teach my clients is actually reducing their disease risk for cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all those things, because they're at their root inflammatory diseases. And you are going to have an increased risk if you have an increase in body fat, increase in blood sugar, increase in inflammation, you are increasing your risk across the board of all of those things.
Now, with getting the variety in our diet for our microbiome, we know it's important to balance that blood sugar, get that fiber.
Hmm.
But going back to the variety piece, because this is where I struggle with clients. Most of my clients I've got a few in their late 40s. The majority are in their late 50s, mid to late 50s and 60s. And some have reached a point where they cannot eat a diversity of vegetables without getting sick, really,
Mm.
even if they're cooked. And they struggle to get that variety in because of that. Have you run into this issue? And if so, what do you suggest for these women?
So, the big thing there is to work on the gut. So, if you can imagine having a barrel, if we fill that barrel with like the toxic load, right? So, we are exposed to many toxins all over the place. Torin,
Your active puppy. I get
hang
it.
on
It's
one
okay.
second.
It's okay. Gotta love the puppies.
It's like gonna chew the couch. Okay. So yeah, so if you can think of the barrel, so we're exposed to toxins all over the place from the food that we eat and obviously our skin products, like additives in our food and the air, like all the time. So what can eventually happen is, like that barrel becomes full. Torin, sorry,
It's
hang on one
okay. It's
second.
okay. Puppies are indeed challenging. I can attest to that.
Yeah, I'm like,
It's,
he's like trying to attack the couch. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry."
it's
This
like
is
you
real
have a
life.
you have a baby again.
Yeah, exactly. No. So what ends up happening is that when that barrel gets full, we start to get more food allergies. We start to become allergic to more things. We start to have more seasonal allergies because our immune system has been overworked. And that is a real issue. My goodness. I really like, really? I'm really sorry. So tell me how bad the barking is. But and so what ends up happening is that first of all, there's the 4 R's of healing your gut. So the first one is to remove foods that could be an issue. So highly inflammatory foods that might be processed foods, that might be grains, that might be dairy, that might be artificial sweeteners, fried foods, etc. So there's a lot of things that can be inflammatory. So you want to remove those things. And some of the main allergens in North America are dairy, wheat, corn, soy, eggs, right? Those are the main ones. So you want to remove some of the things that could be a problem. You want to replace it. But also what you do is you start healing the gut. So what happens is that the gut can actually get more permeable, meaning that things can leak out into your bloodstream. And that is also how we get food sensitivities and food allergies. And so we want to heal those membranes, and we want to basically create an environment where there's less permeability. And so once you do that, and then the last part is reinoculate, then you can actually, heal that. So you remove, you replace, you repair, and then you reinoculate. And when you go through those steps of actually doing the gut healing work, then you should be able to get that person back onto eating more of a variety of food. So you got to look at why is that happening? And typically it happens because we are creatures of habit and we tend to eat the same things. And so the way to actually reduce allergenicity to food is, again, diversity.
No, it's good advice, to temporarily remove things, allow yourself time to heal, and then maybe look at reintroducing things one at a time to see what the culprit is.
And oftentimes it's like when you find the big things that impact your body, if you remove those, all the little ones dissipate, right? So, I could sometimes have people come into my practice where they think that they're allergic to a lot of things, or they do a food sensitivity test and it says, oh, you're allergic to 30 different things. And they just kind of throw up their hands and they're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm not going to not eat all those things. But if you go through the process of healing, you can greatly reduce that. So sorry.
He's compete
I know.
with you.
I know. He's like, no, I want to be the center of attention. Oh my goodness.
It's funny. One time I recorded a podcast. It was a solo one, and I have a bird, and a bird is worse than a dog because no matter what my editor did, he could not edit out the bird shrieking in the
Oh my
background.
goodness. Oh my goodness. We just have to cut those little pieces. But it's also, real life. It happens sometimes.
It is real life. It is.
Yeah.
I'm sure like me, you've done Instagram and Facebook lives, and it's like, it never fails. The doorbell rings, the dogs go insane, a lawnmower goes.
I know. That absolutely. And it's just like, okay, well, there you go.
Yep, here we are.
Life's not perfect. That's why our diet's never going to be perfect, right? That's why we have to just pivot and do the best that we can with what we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch gears again and ask you about the surgery you had. I believe it was recently, the explant surgery to have your implants removed. If you could just share with us a little bit, were you having symptoms? I know that is really something that's a hot topic right now, is women experiencing these symptoms from their implants.
Yeah. So I would say I was not having symptoms. And I think it comes back to that toxic load barrel that I was talking about. So, for me, there's so many things that I do all of the time that I am taking the load off of my body. So I've been eating organic for 20 years. I don't eat out very often. I've been for 20 years making sure that I'm not using products that are toxic with parabens and phthalates and things that are hormone disruptors. So I work on my gut health. I have good bowel movements because that's also very important from a perspective of toxicity. So if we're not having good bowel movements, a lot of women tend towards constipation. And that also means that you have more toxins circulating, right? So in any case, Torin? No. So in any case, for me, I wasn't having symptoms, but when they did when they sent the pathology, they send the actual implants and the casing. So your body creates like scar tissue around the implants.
Yes.
And so they send that away to pathology to be tested. And they did find inflammation in there. So there definitely was an inflammatory process going on. But I had had these implants for 17 years. And the reason why I had them out was simply because knowing then what I knew about the risks, there was no way that I could make the choice to put them back in my body to get a new set. And they definitely had to come out. So it was, one of those things that really came down to personal integrity. For me, I believe that I can't say health is my number one priority if I was going to choose to take that risk again. Like when I got them in, I wasn't aware of that. But when it came time to make that choice again, I really had to make sure that that choice aligned with my values.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us because that's a question I get a lot. I myself have implants, have had them for, well, since my 40s, so 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because at the time I had the surgery done, it's like your head is in one place, like you're thinking one way. And
Mm-hmm.
then now fast forward to being the age I am now, and I don't feel like I'm having problems, but then maybe you start to desire a different look.
Yes.
That's something that started to happen with me. Like, do I need to be this big? Maybe not. I'd rather be smaller. And I see women now asking those questions. And then I'm glad to see that the media movies are beginning to portray women more naturally. I
Yeah.
noticed that the other day. I was watching something, and the woman in the movie, starring in the movie, very small breasted, but she was beautiful. And I was happy to see that because there was a point, and I think I was in my 40s, where I felt like everybody around me had implants. So I was like, I got to do this too, or my
Mm-hmm.
clothes won't look right. I'll look so much better. So I think we go through those shifts mentally too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I had pretty small implants. My implants were just over 200 cc's. One was 230 and one was 250. So they were small to begin with, but they look bigger on me because I'm just a small person. Yeah, I'm only 5'3" and I'm petite. But the truth is that when I got them, I just wanted to look the way that I did before I had my first daughter, because then I lost a lot of volume. I never
Yes.
had big boobs. So
Yeah.
I never wanted to look different. I just, was like, I'm 30, I'm going through a divorce, and I have no volume in my chest, right? Like zero. So that's why I chose. So I wasn't luckily crazy attached to it from a emotional perspective. But they do, provide more confidence. They do make you feel, a certain way. And so when I got to the point where I was like, okay, Ciara, like you're going to have to suck it up and get these out. My appointment was like a year out. And so what I did was I really just started visualizing myself with, a smaller chest. And when I would look at things on social media and notice things like in movies, like you're talking about, I romanticized for myself a smaller chest and that look. And just, it's a very athletic look, right? I mean,
It
it's a
is.
true
It is.
athletic look because I mean, when you talk about bodybuilding, yes, most women who compete, and you almost have to have breast implants to
I know.
complete, really, like the truth is if you want to be on a level playing field, it's just something that you have to do. But, you're never going, like, I wouldn't say never, but pretty much you're never going to see a woman with naturally voluptuous boobs and a really low body fat with like enough muscle on her,
Right.
because you just lose it, because it is body fat, it's, tissue. And I don't think that you can be training and be lean, right? And there's a difference. You can be skinny. Like I have a sister who's 96 pounds She's like 5'1", 96 pounds, and she has double D boobs naturally.
Wow.
Okay. And she is tiny. Like, even compared to me, she's tiny. Okay. And I'm only like 113 pounds. And she, you know, could not do a push up to save her life. She has never worked out. She's never been athletic. She doesn't run. She doesn't do cardio. She doesn't do strength training. So, yes, you can see those women who look skinny, who have big breasts, but you're not going to see a woman who is actually lean and has good muscle mass and who is training who does. So it's really just one of those, I just look at it as like, that's an athletic look. I mean, the same thing if you were to look at like athletes in the Olympics. So I just romanticized it in my head, and I'm even single. I'm like 48 and single. And there were actually friends of mine who said, maybe you want to wait until you get remarried before you have those removed. I kid you
You're
not.
kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. That particular friend is not a friend anymore. But that wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. But I was like, guess what? Like, the guy who is not going to like me because I don't have boobs is not my person.
Exactly.
Newsflash, right? Like, that's just not a thing. And I think also, like, from a perspective of pride, anybody can get breast implants, right? Like, anybody can get breast implants, but not everybody can have, a nice bum. So I'm like, we work hard to take good care of ourselves. And so, for me, I was like, I could separate it from who I was. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas it would be harder to separate my glutes from who I am
That's
because,
a good point.
I'm like, they're mine, right? They're mine. I worked for that. I don't have a BBL or whatever the crazy stuff the kids do. Yeah. So that was kind of the whole process and what happened for me. I absolutely do not regret it. I had a great recovery. I had small implants, so I didn't need a lift. So that was even better because that means it's even faster. They literally just open it up, a larger incision than when I had them, because I wanted them to take out the whole capsule, which is very important. If you're taking out implants for health reasons, you want to make sure 100% that they take out the entire capsule with the implant. That is not the standard of care. And there's a lot of plastic surgeons who will tell you don't need to do that the body will, just basically it'll naturally disintegrate inside you. That's not the case. I've seen so many surgeries where plastic surgeons would bring out these like really hard masses of tissue that were prior scar tissue from a previous implant. So you don't want those things sitting in your body. And also, when they look at the increased risk of breast cancer, it's in that scar tissue that's around that implant. So
Yes.
you don't want to leave it. If you're taking it out for health reasons, then take it all out. So that's what I did, but it was still a very very easy recovery because they just had to basically pop those little things out and stitch me up. So there was no cutting and reshaping or anything like that. I was lucky because my breasts really sat high on my chest, and because they were pretty small, that there was no weight to drag them down. So there was no sagging. There was no sagging of the breast.
Because that
Yeah.
can be an issue. I know
Oh
if
yeah.
somebody's gone very large and then they remove it, they almost have to do some type
Yes.
of tightening of the skin and lifting of the breasts. And I think too, it's such an important point that really it's a woman's choice here. If she feels comfortable with her implants and confident in her clothes, by all means, I'm not opposed to it. Or if she feels like, you know what, I really would like to be smaller, smaller size, or have these out for health reasons. I just think it's such a personal choice, and we have to feel comfortable with whatever we decide to do.
Yeah. And it's just one of those, like, it's a risk factor, right? So you have to weigh the pros and cons to everything. Like, I don't do filler, but I've had Botox, right? That's still a risk factor.
Right.
And I would not, like, I don't have a problem with plastic surgery, but I would rather have a facelift than a whole bunch of filler that, gets stuck
Right.
in my face or clogs up my lymph nodes or something like that. Right. So it more for me, like the foreign stuff can definitely be an issue. And we're just learning new things all the
We
time.
are. We
Right.
are.
So, things that we thought were okay. Cause like I said, I didn't know then what I know now, although I will say I can't say that I didn't know that there wasn't a risk, because before I got my implants in 2006, I had a bit of a like, I thought I had a lump, and I, like, went and had an ultrasound, and I was getting myself freaked out because there was some part of me that felt that if I got these implants I was going to get breast cancer. There was something going on in my head about that. And then I basically went through that process, and it was nothing. Like, the oncologist laughed at me. He was like, that little thing. He goes, you see how that just like moves around? He's like, that's just a little fatty tissue or whatever. He goes, that's nothing. And he like sent me on my way, and I wasted his time. But I can't with good conscience say that there wasn't something intuitively inside me that wasn't saying, hey, you might want to think about this, because I think I went through that process for a reason. So yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Do have autoimmune. I have RA, so I
Hmm.
have given thought to. I don't feel that my implants were the cause of the RA. Looking back on several factors in my life, but I always wonder, would my symptoms be more manageable? Which they're pretty manageable right now, but would they be more manageable if I didn't have these implants? So I understand that kind of these thoughts where we just feel a little bit uneasy about something.
Yeah, and I think anything that you can do to reduce your risk factor. It is something that cause and effect is a whole different thing, right? So it might not cause it, but is it still something that is putting more stress and
Right.
pressure on your immune system? I would say the answer to that is probably always yes. Right? Because it's
Mhm.
a foreign body. So your body is going to have to mount some type of defense. And it's the same with me. I didn't have any symptoms, but when they tested that tissue, there was inflammatory markers in that are not always there. So this was a specific inflammatory marker that my doctor said, he goes, I see it often, but not with everybody. So he's like, it might be like 6 out of every 10 or something like that. But it was definitely there. And like I said, I think it's a factor of so many things in our lives, right? So, because you might be like, okay, well, I have breast implants, so that's one thing, but I eat really healthy, I exercise, I don't drink a lot of alcohol, all of these other things that are like risk factors that like balance it out too.
You
Right?
hit on such an important point with the load. I talk about that. I call it like a bucket overflowing.
Yeah.
Your body is meant to handle a certain amount of stress, physical, mental stress, but there comes that tipping point where that bucket's full
Yes.
and the body just cannot absorb any more of this stress, whether it's from external or internal. Uh,
Exactly. That's exactly it. So it's, we always just have to weigh the pros and cons, and just, I think just informed choice is the most important thing we can focus on.
I agree. Yeah, know the risks and make a decision, an informed decision from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Kira, I want to be respectful of your time as we start to wrap up. Was there
Hmm.
something we didn't talk about that you feel is important for the listeners to know?
Oh my goodness. I could say everything and nothing. I mean, we've covered many things. I could literally talk for hours because I've been doing this for 20 years.
Mhm.
But I do have another back to back call. So, what I would say is, if anybody is interested in some of the things that I was talking about or want to dive deeper, I can give you a link. I have a free masterclass that they can
Okay.
opt into that is approximately 3 hours of content of me diving deep into the subjects and talking about metabolism and blood sugar and gut health and all of the things that affect us, as women over 40. And that would be, awesome for any of your listeners to just like arm themselves with more information, because I really think that is what sets us free and what helps us to elevate our lives and make us realize that we have so much under our own control when it comes to our health, how we age, and how we feel.
That's so good, and I urge the listeners to grab this resource and learn as much as you can. Kira, you're on Instagram? Where can people find you?
Yeah, Instagram is definitely the place that I hang out the most. And I'm at Ciara Foy Inc. on Instagram. So CIARAFOY Inc. And I'll give you the link to put it in the show notes. That's definitely the best place to find me. And then, of course, I also have a podcast, which is the Empowered Feminine Podcast.
It's a great podcast. I listened to a couple of episodes.
Thank
So
you.
encourage you all to check that out too. And we'll make sure all of this is in the show notes. And Ciara, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really a wonderful conversation. I wish you the best of luck with your puppy.
Thank you so much. And so sorry about the puppy
Oh, no,
stuff.
no,
At
no.
least he's quiet now.
I could kind of hear mine in the background on the other side of the house. And I'm like, oh dear, what's he doing?
I know. It's like constant vigilance. Like talk about like a stress on your nervous system.
Oh my goodness. I know. And I say to myself, I just had shoulder surgery. And what do? I get a puppy? Like,
Yeah,
what was I thinking?
that's a good point. You and I might be addicted to chaos.
I think so. I think so.
Yes, we like a little challenge in our life.
We do. We like things lively.
Yes, exactly. Well, this was so lovely, Carol. So thank you so much. And I gotta hop to a Zoom call. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Wonderful.
You should
Thank
come
you
over on
so
my
much.
podcast.
Oh, I would love it. I would
Yeah,
absolutely love it. Thank you.
awesome.
And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.